Hello and welcome to Contramundum. I am Andrew Isker and this is CJ Engel as always. And today we are going to be talking about Christmas. Symbols are incredibly powerful, and there are few symbols more potent in demonstrating the continued existence of Christendom in the public mind than the widespread celebration of Christmas. And this is why the often lampooned war on Christmas, right, creates such a visceral reaction in many people. Right, it is our holiday, and we love it. It's ours, and we despise those who want to attack and subvert it. So, to discuss what Christmas means in the year of our Lord 2024 in America, we're joined by Mr. Jared Lovell of the North American Anglican and the Reformed Episcopal Church. Is that right, Jared? Tell us about your background a little before we kick off here.
Sure. So thanks for having me on for your Festivus Day special. We're talking about Festivus.
Airing of grievances.
Airing of grievances. I've got a few. So, yeah, my backgrounds, I teach at Memorial Academy. That's first of all my main job. Starting a few years ago, I began pursuing ordination in the Reformed Episcopal Church. I'm now ordained as a deacon in that same institution. I serve at Grace Anglican Church in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I'm finishing out my seminary degree, and so hopefully by next year around this time, I'll be ordained as a priest in the Reformed Episcopal Church. I also write for, as you mentioned, the North American Anglican is the primary place where my writings are located. So yeah, those are my affiliations.
Wonderful. So yeah, CJ and I've known you for several years, at least online. CJ's got to meet you in person, and I haven't, so I'm envious of that. But we thought, all right, who's the best guy we can have to talk about Christmas, and especially the cultural implications of it, the history of the celebration of Christmas in the Anglo-American tradition, and CJ's like, well, there's nobody better than Jared, so we better get him on. So that's why we brought you on, man. So you don't let us down.
Well, yeah, no pressure. I got the show notes about an hour ago, so yeah, I'll riff. Well, it's kind of funny that you say that. I think it all started with me being on CJ's podcast or the Chronicles podcast like a year ago, and then CJ was at our conference in October, and we ended up kind of talking about some of the same things in the workshop we did together where Christmas came up again. And so I didn't plan on that. We were just kind of, running with things. And as I thought about it after the fact, I was like, yeah, these are kind of the same things we talked about on the podcast a year ago. And then, so here we are a year later on another podcast talking about Christmas. So I don't know if that makes me an expert or not, but
yes, you are the Christmas expert.
I'll play one here on TV today. So
that's right.
Well, I think one of the things that I want to emphasize is in American evangelicalism, sort of downstream from Enlightenment. Religion to us is very propositional. It's very much facts. What's the Christmas story? Just tell me what he did, why it's important. But I think Christmas, in a broader sense, it's sort of it's a season of symbology. It's a season of communicating via aesthetic, nostalgia, memories, the arts. There's a whole lot of things that are on the periphery that we don't even realize have shaped our souls. And Christmas is a major, crucial foundation to what we consider a holiday, in the West. And I tweeted several times that Christmas is the preeminent holiday of Christendom. And I got some debate about whether that's actually Easter, but the point is that Christmas is an extremely important day. And whereas Thanksgiving is very much an experience of the American history, Christmas is the holiday that belongs to Christendom. So it's much broader than that. And we all have our own traditions and our own flavors of what that means, but really it's something that can unite us, in a transnational way. So maybe just reflect a little bit on, you're a minister, you are dealing with this right now. This week is very important to you. So maybe talk about that. Why is Christmas, why does that have such a tug on the hearts of Westerners?
So let me back up from that just a second. As important as Christmas is to the West, in my tradition, um, time and how we inhabit time and how we think of ourselves in space and time is important, and that applies to all throughout the year, not just Christmas. So Christmas just happens to be one instance, one very important way in which we inhabit time. But in how when we think of ourselves as religious human beings, it should affect how we process the world, how we see the world, how we enjoy the various seasons of the year. So in my tradition, we don't just have Christmas, we have Advent before Christmas, right? And we have after Christmas, Epiphany, and after that, a season of Lent and Easter. And all throughout the year, there is a conscious way of inhabiting time in that part of the year, in other words, making each part of the year meaningful. And we especially do that at Christmas. But for a lot of people, it's only at Christmas. It's the time of meaning around the year. Now everything means something. You have the dog days of summer and the long days of winter, and it's just day after day. But then Christmas is that one season of the year that becomes extremely meaningful, right? And we can talk about some of the reasons why that is. A lot of it's based around consumerism. But I'd like to get back to this idea of, why is it, Christmas is important, or all of these seasons are important, is because as human beings, we are not just propositional creatures; we are embodied souls. So we can think, we do think, we should think, but we also live as persons with flesh and in time and in space. And connecting this back to Christmas and the incarnation that we celebrate, this all points back to who Christ is, right? That Christ is not, just a spirit. He is not a proposition or an idea. He is a man. And so fully God and fully man, who takes on all of who we are, and everything, nothing is redeemed that isn't taken on. So if you want to try to think of Jesus as something less than fully human, well, whatever part that is not like us is not a part of us that's going to be redeemed. And so that's the beauty of Christmas and the incarnation, is that Christ becomes like us in every way, except in his incapacity to sin, in his perfection. And so I was actually just preaching on this yesterday in terms of the virgin birth and what that implies. And I said in the sermon that if you really think about it, it should drive you almost to the point of doubt that it could be true. Sometimes it's a comfortable doctrine we're used to. We're used to seeing major scenes, and of course Jesus became a baby, and he sits there in the cradle in the manger. But when you really think about Jesus being fully divine, fully man, it should just stretch the bounds of the imagination. And I said this is why Gabriel's words to Mary are appropriate when he says, "For nothing is impossible with God." You really need that, because without that, you really should think that is impossible. That is a fairy tale. But if you think about the fact, just consider that Jesus Christ today, not only did he just become human for a time, he is eternally human. He's human today with Mary's DNA running through his body. Like, that's just amazing to me. He's not just, God, eternally human, but he is the product of a human being as well. And so Christ being fully human, is like us in every way, lives in time and space as a person while being fully God. And if you think about it, when we talk about the Word of God, Scripture, we receive that in the same way. The scripture did not come floating down to us out of the sky, perfectly written. It is very much, while it's God's word, while it's inerrant, while it is every other adjective you want to put in there, inspired, authoritative, all of those things, it is also a product of men that God uses. So God gives us his word the same way he gives us himself, through natural means, as humans, uses humans to write it, to edit it, to compile it, to read it, to memorize it, and to embrace it, to liturgically read it. All of these things are human. And so Christianity itself is very human religion. It's not a book where one guy goes off into a cave and receives all of these special words nobody else gets. So same with the Christmas holiday. So all of these examples, we shouldn't look at Christmas as somehow out of line with the Christian tradition. It's an incarnational holiday. It is a set of experiences and rituals, and it speaks to us. It resonates with us as human beings, and is foundational to our identity, especially in the West, where the gospel throughout the last 2,000 years has taken root.
Mm-hmm. And like we talk a lot about the war on Christmas, right? Like, there's the funny meme online about, and it's actually very real, but like how people say happy holidays, but we're countercultural, so we say Merry Christmas. But like why are these things important? Why does Christmas matter? I guess another way of saying it is, why do our traditions matter? Why does the fact that this is this mixture between divine providence and our own human experiences, why is that something that matters? Why is Christmas not just to be something about what we glean from textual exegesis?
Well, yeah, related to what I was just saying before, is that part of how we learn as human beings is through experience. Through various rituals and catechisms. And it's not just the ideas that are inserted into our minds, but it is through the experiences, the practices that we engage in over and over and over again that cause the truth to really sink into our bones. So it is Christmas, with all of the festivities and all of the symbols and all of, whether it's trees or whether it's stars or it's angels or nativity scenes, all of these are learning aids that stick in our mind. These images stick in our minds, even if we are sleeping through the sermon, okay, or through the Sunday school class. And so this, we talk about this even in education. Like, if this was an education podcast, we talk about, certain people have to learn with their hands. They need to be busy with their hands, doing things with their hands, because having that experience, there's a kind of learning that comes from that. It's not just the memorizing of propositions, facts, or times tables. There is the application of them. There's using them. And so in that tactile way, Christmas gives us a set of those traditions. Some of them we continue to add to. Some of them have been passed down from generations, but they give us a way of connecting to the truth in a way that forms our loves. And another thing is that Christmas is not something we just have, in common with our families or with, our people today, people living today. So some holidays, more recent than others, all you have in common with other people, you mentioned like Thanksgiving. That's a uniquely American holiday. The 4th of July, uniquely American holiday. And in the 4th of July, it's something that would go back, to 1776. Thanksgiving goes back to the 1600s. Christmas is something that goes back and extends ages and ages into the past of Christian history. And so when we celebrate Christmas, we're not just celebrating with our contemporaries, people of our generation, but it also, all of these traditions connect us with a body of people, not only around the world, but for generations past, for centuries and centuries. So there's a solidarity there that extends further into the past, and that again roots us. It's not just something that we do because we like it. It's something that generations before have celebrated. So it's this goes into the calendar as well. During Christmas, there's 12 days, not one. And for most of those days, there's something else to celebrate on those days, whether it's St. Stephen's Day on the 2nd, St. John's Day on the 3rd, the Day of Holy Innocents on the 4th. There are people and persons, there are persons and events throughout history that we can connect with, that makes this holiday more embodied and deeper than just something because we do it because it's in our family or in our country. So that's what I would say there.
Well, yeah, that's part of it too. Like, I mean, with a holiday like that, I mean, I like to, when I'm looking through the the song book at church, at the Christmas songs, and you see some songs, Christmas and Advent songs, are very old, like "Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silence" is written by St. Ambrose. I mean, it's been sung, and so you think about that for just like a moment. It's like, this is a song, obviously not in English, it would be sung this way, but this is a song that St. Augustine would have sang. This is a song that Charlemagne and King Alfred and all these Christians all throughout history would have sang together, and we're joining that long great tradition. And so many of our history and heritage in America is largely mediated through the British, through the English,
right?
And so many of our Christmas traditions come from them, and we're doing the same things that people did generations and generations ago, and participating in that, and that our children and grandchildren and those descended from us that we will never meet are also going to be participating in these same things. I mean, maybe 500 years from now, my great 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 grandchildren will be making gingerbread houses. Maybe not. I don't know. More than likely they will, or something like that. Many of the things that we do. I mean, even my family is largely German, so there's all sorts of German and continental traditions that are a little bit different than England, that we do. Whether it's like these cookies, I hated them when my grandma would make them because they were like rock hard and they'd break my teeth. But Pfeffernusse, but now I love it. Yeah, now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of these fond days of when I was a child. Or even coming down into the living room on Christmas Day, and you smell the Christmas tree, right? It has to be a real one. It can't be a plastic one.
Right.
Like the scent of a fir tree,
Right.
filling the room, right? It's something that's beautiful, right? And especially like olfactory things like that are really potent, very really powerful. Right? You smell the scent of like fresh pine, and it's like, this is Christmas, or this smells like Christmas, or or like the smell of baking Christmas cookies, right? That's like, I smell that, boom, I'm taken back to when I'm 7 years old at my mom's house, and so, no video, we lost video.
I think you can still hear us, right, Jared?
Yeah, you can still hear us. Yeah, good. Well, maybe we're only doing audio for now. Oh, okay. And so, all of these things, like part of tradition is, and the beautiful thing in tradition is knowing that people you are descended from, that you have no recollection of them, what they looked like, sounded like, anything like, you don't know their names. You're participating in the exact same things that they did, and celebrating the same things that they did. That's part of the beauty of Christmas, and these are kind of the things, like when we talk about it, that we want to get back. Like, sometimes people will ask me, like, well, we talk about the commercialization of Christmas and what Christmas has become in like modern, trash world America, and how do we, fight back against those things, right? Do we accost the Starbucks employee for telling us Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas? What should we actually do? And one thing I say, well, when you're having dinner during the Advent season and during Christmas, celebrate all 12 days of Christmas, but also, right, before you pray to eat with your family, sing a couple of Christmas carols, right? Just add little things like that. and look back and think, okay, what did people do before everything was just Coca-Cola Santa Claus and Frosty the Snowman? Or what did your great great grandfather do for Christmas with their children? Um, and think about those things and begin to embody them once again. So I guess yeah, that leads me to to talk about the war on Christmas. We're going to say Merry Christmas again. Um, right?
Well,
What uh, right? What do you think is going on there? In the we talked, we get there's all sorts of conflict and fighting on the internet now about this term, the post-war consensus, and everything that happened in the 20th century and all of the cultural changes and so forth. But it's really evident with Christmas and how Christmas has changed. So, talk about that a little bit. What are your thoughts about those things?
well, I'll get to that. One thing I would just want to add to what you were saying, in terms of kind of meeting an objection, by those, somebody could respond to what you're saying, and our covenanter friends who say, you can remember all these things. You can worship just as your fathers worshipped every Sunday. This is a tradition too. You don't need to invent these new traditions. And so some of the pushback toward, Christmas or Easter or anything like that would be, we can do this every Sunday. Why should we have special Sundays set apart for, celebrating the birth of Christ, or other seasons of the year that are more dedicated to repentance rather than celebration? We shouldn't have to inflict that kind of weighting on ourselves or deprivation, because every Sunday is the Lord's Day, and we can celebrate all of these things. But again, it goes back to the point I made at the outset, in that as humans, we don't. You can't celebrate. You get just like when you celebrate your children's birthday. They could say, "Well, why don't we're celebrating another year of your life and a blessing that you are alive for another year, and that what God has done in your life. Well, why do we have to do that one day a year? Why don't we do this every day? And the kid would probably love having a cake every day, but we set aside a particular time to celebrate that person's life. Of course, we're happy that they're alive every day and what God's doing in their life throughout the year, besides just that one day. But we do, as human beings, dedicate a specific time for that. And the same with Christmas, is that, well, why can't you just do this every week? Why do you have to set it, make it, add all these other traditions? Well, because we are tactile creatures, we are humans, and this is how we make our way in the world. We set aside certain times for certain things. It's hard to celebrate everything all the time in the same way. And so, yes, this is why we, when we turn in our hymnals to certain sections in our hymnals and sing Christmas carols at certain times of the year, and not, in the spring, we sing something else that reflects the season. So, that's why, is because you can't, if we're going to flatten everything, to being the same all year round, is anything ever actually special in that way? I would say no. So that this also relates to the question you ask, in terms of this flattening of this happy holidays idea as opposed to Merry Christmas. And I think this would be the secular counterpart to the same thing, is that because it's not just a happy holiday. The reason you say happy holidays is not just to get rid of the Christmas. It's so that it covers a whole bunch of other holidays, right? So it's the reason you say happy holidays is not just to be a synonym for Christmas. It's to cover yourself when you are. I was just at the post office this morning. And the lady said, have a good holiday, as I walked out the door. Why? Because right in the word, she can't be sure of what I am. Okay, she doesn't know with 100% certainty whether I celebrate Christmas. I mean, given my look, she could probably place a good. But when you are dealing with people, especially in the workplace and you're in customer service, happy holidays is there to make sure I've covered them all without misidentifying you, because maybe you celebrate Kwanzaa, or maybe you celebrate Hanukkah, or maybe you celebrate whatever else that was made up yesterday, and maybe you celebrate nothing. And so I just want you're all going to have some holiday, and I want to cover my bases there. And happy holidays helps you to do that. And it assumes that there is, and this is something I know you guys talk about a lot, but it assumes that there is no core there with which we could all be identified, right? And I think that's part of the reason for it. It is not necessarily just about trying to get Christ out of Christmas. It is a blanket to make sure you do not offend anyone and do not assume their religious preference.
Yeah, it's the coexist bumper sticker.
Exactly, it is. That's a good way. That's a good way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah, because there's a cross there. That's the T, right? So that's one of the holidays, right? So yeah, it's an implicitly secularist reading this time of year, right? So don't use it.
Well, I mean, what
if you get it on a Christmas card, burn that Christmas card. Don't talk to those people anymore.
but like what it also is, it's basically a denial of community. It's basically like, it's just this reiteration that every individual is his own world, and so like we all get to choose our own destiny. We all get to choose what holiday we celebrate, what religion, what metaphysical model in which we operate. Like that's just sort of that re-emphasis of that entire way of thinking, and so it really is a fulfillment of the 20th century, is what it is.
Exactly.
And I think that's where I wanted to go with it, as well as like, does this trend of secularizing, the holidays, or pluralizing the holidays, is that symptomatic of broader developments in the West? That's my question.
I think you've kind of answered your own question.
I need you to step in and go from
there. Yes, I would say, yeah. I mean, that it is another way that, again, not to assume, and to recognize that, everybody is out there, pursuing their own definition of the good. What does, and I mean, the step before this was, what does Christmas, mean to you, sort of thing. And so the step before this was, let's get some symbols that everybody can identify with, for that. So we have that with the Santa and the reindeer and all of that, and that actually worked for a bit. I'm still sentimental to that, because I go back to the 90s. Being a 90s kid, 90s were like the last great decade, in my opinion, before everything, went crazy. So if you go back in the 90s, the 80s, I saw a bunch of pictures. It was a video of how things were in the 90s. And I was sharing it with my wife the other day, and every picture that came up, it was like, oh yeah. There was all of that. And there was a lot of nostalgia there, but yeah, in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, what you had is this temporary time of peace, where you weren't into the full-on culture war yet. And we could all agree about, Christmas lights, Santa Claus, reindeer, and these other things. And they provided the kind of community you're talking about, because some people didn't believe, and Christmas as it is. Well, now we're a step removed from that. We're now a generation or two removed from that, where you can't even assume that these symbols of Santa Claus, etc., will provide the cohesion around the holiday anymore, because we're even more diverse than that. So now it's the happy holidays. We get away from Christmas, because now holidays includes all of these other holidays on top of Christmas. So personally, I'm not one of the purists that's going to say, get rid of all of the sentimental Christmas stuff. I actually like the idea of, adding to the lore and even incorporating it into the Christmas story. Like, yeah, totally. Santa Claus works for Jesus. That's fine. And kind of redeeming it that way. And incorporating it provides some cohesion and unity. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Because one of the things that we wanted to touch on was the fact that there is this sort of this mixture that Christianity can go into all of these different world historical scenarios and basically adopt them for its own purpose. I mean, like, everybody knows that there are similarities between some of the practices of Western Christmas celebrations and the pagan past. And part of that is because Christianity is able to appropriate for its own ends the conquering of other religions, in a sense. And so, like, I do think that there is a sense of importance, like leaning into nostalgia, the stories, the lore that were even birthed in the 1940s. Those are still important to who we are today.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so like, let's step back and look at history a little bit. I know Andrew has some good opinions on this, but let's talk about the fact that some of our traditions in the Christmas season are related to the experience that the expansion of Christianity had with paganism in Germanic and the English speaking world, and why is that okay? Why is that not a bad thing?
Yeah, or the folk, some of the folk things, right? I mean, that's what Santa really comes from. Or even on in continental Europe, you have. You saw this in The Office with the Pennsylvania Dutch Christmas, right? With Belschnickel and the other one that was very offensive.
Well, Jared's in Scranton.
Yeah, that's right. You are in Scranton. Yeah, so this is your ground zero, right? But I mean, we look at those things as kind of funny and comical to a certain degree, but those were a part of the historic celebration of Christmas in the European context. And I mean, I think what CJ is saying too is like that's part of that's something that is fascinating actually about Christmas, is that when the Christian religion comes to a place and dominates it, right, where everyone converts and becomes Christian, there are aspects of their pre-existent culture that that basically get taken over, but they aren't eradicated completely. Yeah, they're Christianized. Exactly. And so, I mean, so you think about that. If I saw Lu Yi in the chat there. Like, if when not if the Christian religion dominates mainland China, right? It will look different. Christmas there will look very different than it does in 1700s England, right? And
If Louis has his way, yes, it will.
Oh yeah. If he's in charge of it, but there'll be different foods that they eat they're not going to eat, probably like prime rib or lamb with mint jelly or whatever, right? They there he is. Yeah, we have not figured out Christmas food yet. Yeah, we'll add that one. Yeah, they will. It'll be wild and weird, but it'll be cool. But there will be things like that. And you think about the same thing. Every part of the world, right? It will be. It will have those aspects of it as well. So that's a thing that I think is fascinating about Christmas. I mean, we went when I was 19 years old. My family went to England for Christmas. Even though we're not English, my parents, because of watching British TV on PBS, became Anglophiles, and and so we went to England for Christmas, and we discovered all sorts of strange traditions that we did not have. Right, like, so they have these things called like poppers that they put on the plate on like Christmas Eve, and you pop those things, and like a little firecracker goes off, and then there's a little crown that you get to wear, and there's little toys in there for the children. And we thought, man, that's really cool. And so my family started just doing that. And I mean, or even I think in terms of the the British tradition, like a couple 5 or 6 years ago, we went to go look at Christmas lights. Right, there's another one. Christmas lights and decorations, and we're driving around, and we had Minnesota Public Radio on, and they were broadcasting the lessons and carols service, I think from Westminster Abbey. And the readings, it was really cool because the readings were done like instantly. I knew who it was speaking, because it was, one of them was Jeremy Irons and the other was Michael Caine, and reading from Isaiah and from the Gospel of Luke. And it was like, and if anyone in the chat can find, I've been looking for it for years. I cannot find that broadcast anywhere. And it was glorious. And so like even something like that, like a lessons and carol service, the aesthetics of a liturgy like that, where God's word is read in this very solemn, dignified manner, and then it's responded to in song.
is so beautiful. And I think as we were driving, my mom was tearing up a little bit. It was just so beautiful.
And the point is that stuck with you.
Yes, and this is like at least 6 or 7 years ago, and I remember it like that, and that's the thing. Like it stays with you. My church, growing up, we would have a Christmas Eve service, and the pastor, an old German guy who played the accordion. At the end of the service, he would play Silent Night and sing it in German, and we'd have the candle lights and everything. It was beautiful, and that remained with me my entire life. And so you think about like those traditions, the things that we experience over time, right? That make the season very, very special. What it does, it reinforces in your mind and in your soul from childhood on that and in ways you don't quite understand when you're a child, that you grow to understand as you mature. That this season is very special, right? It's really special because I get toys on December 25th. Like that's really cool. And as you grow and mature, you understand that we celebrate this. This is special and important, and we are made to love it in very distinct ways as children, because we are celebrating Christ coming, the eternal God, eternally pre-existent, second person of the Trinity, coming into human history and taking on human flesh. That is so important, so profound to all of human existence that we make such a big deal out of it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's so much of this stuff, like even in the cultural aspect of it, like, when you're in like new negative world, as Aaron Wren calls it, and you say Merry Christmas to people, and in the back of your head, it's kind of a little bit transgressive and offensive to some people. And so maybe you do it because you want to just, get a rise out of people. But you know that you do that because what you are declaring is that we are Christians. America is a Christian country. We celebrate Christmas here, right? We don't do this happy holiday stuff. It is Merry Christmas, right? This is our country, and it always has been. We've always celebrated Christmas, and we don't care who we offend with that, right? There's something glorious to that as well.
Well, I like what you were, just talking about that experience, and I was in Canterbury. It wasn't during Christmas
time
proper, but obviously being in a situation like this, that's much more formative than anything else I can remember. Like these daily lessons or reading the Bible, those are important things. But the formation of the soul.
Right. By the way, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, when we get to it, but the formation of the formation of the soul here, it actually is the power of cultural Christianity. That's what's going on there. There is an expansion of the Christian faith just by participating in these seasonal festivities.
Well, yeah, I mean to that end, and Jared can maybe speak to this a little bit too, but like even your like awful pragmatic evangelical big box mega church things, like the thing that they understand is like there are 2 times a year where they can do outreach and people will come to church that don't normally come to church, where they can get them in and begin to evangelize them and everything else. And it's Christmas and it's Easter, right? They know that, and that's it. That's an implicit confession by them. These people who decry cultural Christianity and every other circumstance of them saying there is cultural Christianity, good, and it's useful, and it draws people to Jesus Christ, right? And so I always find that very, very interesting. But I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, as you were just going through all these memories and experiences you had, whether in England or the German traditions, and how that stuck with you, I was just thinking in terms of, as children get older and they go off to college or wherever, when they are formed, back to what CJ was saying, the formation of the soul, they have these defining experiences that stick with them. The kinds of arguments that, religion was created for man to cope with his environment, or it has some psychological use, or these doctrines were made up, because of Constantine in 325 or something. You set that against, okay, all these, these arguments from, we've proven that this couldn't happen, this isn't true. Put that up against all of these kinds of experience you were just describing. That where it's because of these things that you don't just know things to be true propositionally. There's a kind of, it in your bones that this is true. Right. And so even if you want to be transgressive and say, you know what, I'm a little too smart for that now, because I've got this college professor or this college environment, that is appealing to me, there's still this body of sentiment that, and I've heard people say this too, that, they grew up, memorizing and saying the Apostles' Creed every Sunday and going through, and they went off for a while, when during their college years, and then they hear the music, or they hear the creed, or they hear and it just, there's something that it triggers in their minds. It's like, I know the truth, I know what's right, and they're brought back into that. And so I think there's an apologetical argument here to make as well, in terms of what we're doing, in terms of celebrating. It's like, did you get the new apologetics book by so and so? I don't know. It might be better to just, bathe your children in this environment, Christmas, Easter, and not just those, but bathe them in this environment of the church year will probably function as a better apologetics course than how to refute the atheist in 90 seconds with these 3 quick arguments or something. So
that's in logic.
So I think that's part of the purpose here is just, and I was just thinking that in terms of all you were saying right there. Oh, I remember this, and I remember that, and I remember this, and that just it stuck with me. Yeah, and it sticks with younger generations too. And so, in terms of what we were talking about before, incorporating some of the folk traditions with, of that we grew up with, and incorporating them with the traditional understanding of Christmas and all of that. That's one thing in terms of redeeming Santa Claus. I want my kids, when the first thing that they think of is Saint Nicholas of Myra, that name is on their tongue, that they look at him as this Santa Claus figure who was in the church, part of our heritage, who did great things and defended the doctrines we believe. And so there is a way to do this, to kind of to bend all of the experiences that you have and your opportunities, the time you have in life, and to bend them toward the truth. All right. And that's really what we're doing in terms of, go back to CJ's raising the question a few minutes ago, in terms of Christianity conquering all of these things. What you're really doing is taking these common things around you, and having been transformed, a culture being transformed by Christ really means taking these common things around you and pointing them back toward the one who made them and for whom they were made, ultimately using them as reminders. I mean, this isn't something new. This is not some new Christian nationalist strategy, to like this. If you go back into the Middle Ages, if you look at some of the great devotional writers of the Middle Ages, there would be this idea of contemplative prayer, or this practice of remembering, where you daily go about your work and you use the instruments and the tools and the things that your daily activities as ways of reminding you of Christ, of pointing back to Christ. So some of the great women in the Middle Ages, writers, mystics even, would do this, where they would spend their day, whether it's washing dishes or clothes or whatever they're doing, and it's a time for a certain kind of prayer, a certain type of meditation. You're taking the things around you, this daily remembering and reminding the things around you, and pointing them back to Christ. And what they understood is that we do that anyway. We fall into habits anyway. We do certain things every day without thinking about them, that we use instruments to remind us of other things, whether it's checking the stock market or what's on Netflix, or whatever we're into, the sports scores. We fall into these habits without thinking about them anyway. And I think one of the things the medievals even understood was, in the mystics and the spiritualists, the devotionalists, was taking physical things and point them toward, what is most important, contemplating and remembering that which is most important. And again, it takes us full circle back to what Christ is, both physical, a body, and spirit, right? Those two things are connected. So.
Yeah, like I want to play off that on this this comment here. Let me just pull it up.
Yeah,
because I think this is important. I mean,
yeah, let's read it too.
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
BJJ wins again. The very reasonable 80 Robles talked about how cultural Christianity played a major role in his conversion. When he hit rock bottom, he knew where to look.
Yeah, like so. In fact, I mean, I wouldn't say I've ever like hit rock bottom in any significant way, but there, of course, have been moments in my life where I'm like disinterested in things like the Christian religion. I mean, we all go through that in college. It was that way for me. I wouldn't say I walked away from the faith or anything, but the things that bring me back are not these really impressive logical arguments. The things that bring me back are the significances that became part of me when I didn't realize that I was being apologized during childhood, just by being immersed in these seasonal festivities that we would go through. And that was the most powerful, anchor on my soul that kept me grounded. These are the things that you look to. So the formation of the soul is, much more of a stalwart foundation for the expansion of Christianity than even these really, impressive, logically, cohesive arguments for Christianity.
Like, people don't ultimately just to get into deep apologetic stuff. Like, people don't become Christians on the basis of rational discourse. I mean, ordinarily on the basis of rational discourse and logical syllogism and all of that. Like, that's they convert, they become Christian because they want it to be true. Right. They want it to be true. And then all of the rational discourse, all of the argumentation, all of that backfills everything else. Then once you want it to be true, then it all makes sense. Then you can put the pieces together. Okay. Yep. If A, then B, and so on and so forth. Right. That's how people, come to the Lord. And that's how his word, like his word being buried deep in people's hearts. Right. That's what happens. And it doesn't happen because, my brain figured it all out. It's far beyond just what our mental faculties are able to do. And so these incarnational things, right? So the word of God becoming, tangible and material in space and time is what shapes and forms our soul. I mean, that's why, just even to get into like sacramental theology, right? What is going on in the Lord's Supper isn't just my brain is sending a signal, or my senses are sending a signal to my brain that there's bread in my mouth and wine or whatever. It's like God is doing something far beyond what our rational senses can apprehend when we take the Lord's Supper. Right. And he's shaping us and forming us through this action, through this grace that he's given us. And that is something that's potent and profound and goes far beyond what we know or what we think. And Christmas plays, I'm not going to say, well, Christmas is sacramental or whatever, but it plays a similar role, right? And all sorts of Christian things, all sorts of Christian symbol does that, right? It shapes us and forms us.
Christmas is an affirmation of a sacramental view of the world.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So I could, I could take this in a slightly different direction, and that is the same could be said for dress, for how ministers dress and present themselves in the world, as well as how church buildings look. So if you think of even some, Christmas, show. Let's say it's not even particularly Christian, but you'll have somebody who is down, like CJ was talking about, rock bottom. That goes back to the comment there from about AD Robles. But you take somebody who at some stage in the movie is down, they're having some kind of crisis, rock bottom, and then where do they go? They go into the church building on Christmas, even though they're not a believer. They never go to church any other time. Yeah. But why do they go there, right? And would they, here's an interesting question, if that church was not like a cathedral-looking church, it didn't stand out as a church, and it was just a relatable building, a shed, because we want to be relatable with a coffee shop or something. Would anybody run there, as something unique, saying, I don't know what I believe, I haven't even thought about Christ, but I've deep down, I know there's some kind of answer in there, right? Yeah. Into this building. I feel like this is where I should be. And, and the movie plot will continue on where they find some insight. And it might be just some liberal insight from a liberal priest who comes up there and says, believe it. But the point is that there's some reason they're drawn into that kind of, there's some answer there that they know deep down to be true. And I was thinking in terms of dress, that I've heard people, and I've actually experienced this just in my short time, in ministry, is that if you're out in public and dressed wearing a collar, you will find people who will come straight to you and will address you as, as a father, as a priest or something, saying, pray for me. Right. And I know people who have many way more stories of this happens, where I heard a group of people saying that they were together. They're all ministers. One of them was still dressed in a collar. The other ones were ministers as well, but it changed into regular clothes, right? And there was someone who spotted them who was spiritually in need, walked right past the others, right to the one that was wearing a collar. And so I'm not here trying to make an argument of why you should or shouldn't wear a collar, but I am saying that these are all like visible manifestations of an idea. They're all symbols that, to your point, people are drawn to. There's a kind of truth that is communicated, that they say, for 99% of my life, I'm a secularist. I just want to live my own life. I'm not overly religious. But when you get into a crisis like this, a spiritual crisis where your world is crashing, where do people go for hope, right? They go to people who are dressed a certain way. They go to buildings that look a certain way. Because those buildings communicate something in their aesthetic that they're looking for. Now, it's true that in a primitive society, you say, well, what about those missionaries out in the jungle? They can't build these cathedrals. Yes, I'm not saying this is the end all be all, but in a society that has been transformed at least once, where Christianity has been inculcated, we should take on the forms of Christianity, that those beacons of hope to people. We should have them. And so and oftentimes in Christianity, it comes down to a pragmatic argument, saying, well, we could fit this many more people into a building that has no aesthetic whatsoever, or this would be a better location, or it's a more relatable kind of facade. And we don't take account of the fact that there is a Christian aesthetic. There is a church aesthetic that itself is a kind of public theology that you are declaring. This is something I've even been thinking about in our church, is that sometimes our church, we want to think of our churches as these private institutions exempt from the state. So we're private. This is private property, right? And yet we want to talk about having a Christian nation. I think one way we could work toward that is start thinking of our church properties as public property. That not that we want to start just paying a bunch of taxes to the state, but this is public ground, and we're a public witness in the community, and we're just kind of asserting ourselves as kind of the voice of this community. And so, on our property, we have people who use our picnic tables and have lunch. There are people who walk their dogs through it. And so I've been talking about what we need to do. What I want to do at my church is paint a mural on one area of our building where it would be really conducive to this, that everybody would have to walk by all the time and see. something profound, something poignant, something that causes people to think about the fact and that reminds them of the fact that there is an afterlife, that there is a day of accountability. One of the reasons,
like a bunch of Van Til points or something.
What's that?
By what standard?
Yeah, that question. We'll just say that. Yeah, no, but it's one of the one of the reasons it's so easy to be a secularist today is because with all the billboards and all of the advertisements and all of the distractions, you're never forced to think about your own mortality. And I think one thing churches can start doing is thinking of their property as public property, where in a way they are not putting up one more billboard, for one more activity, but using their space to aesthetically communicate a message that is a reminder of one's mortality. And this goes right back to Christmas as well. So Christmas is part of that. So decorating your building, decorating your house, drawing these symbols and reminders to people that Christ came into the world, God became flesh, and what Advent's all about, that he's going to be coming again, right? Well, this is why Advent is so important, and it's really convenient in the world we live in to go from Thanksgiving, where we're so thankful for everything, right, to the stores to take care of all to take advantage of all the specials on Christmas shopping, and distract ourselves until we get to our next party. At the Advent season is a time of reminder that just as Christ came before, he's coming again. So get yourself ready, because this party isn't going to last forever. But it is interesting how our more secularized Christmas manages to cut out all of these times of penance, these times of going without, these times of reflection, and we just go from party to party. That we never lose the parties in all of this. We cut out the uncomfortable seasons that would cause us to reflect. So that's part of, I think, in need of recovery as well. Christmas shines all the brighter when you've had some time to slow down and reflect and think about not only your spiritual state, but the passing nature of this life, the transient nature of this life. Then Christmas really stands out, right? You should be feeling good and hopeless, and that's when the ray of light shines in, reminding you that in the darkest season of the year, Christ came. So that accentuates Christmas all the more, I would say.
Yeah, like I was gonna, comment on that, just some practical steps, because one of the things that I'm noticing, obviously, is that as the world becomes more and more hostile to Christianity, there is an interesting phenomenon of Christians engaged in a sort of not only like intellectual ressourcement, but cultural ressourcement as well. So there's this interesting scenario happening where people are becoming more and more hostile to the Christian faith at the same time as a lot of us are rediscovering it. And it seems like these two are going to come into fantastic conflict at some point.
They already are coming into
conflict. Maybe
Yeah.
In an increasingly hostile world, I was going to ask you what are some things churches can do, but I think that answer provides
that answers
a lot
that
of
question. Yeah,
it provides a lot of leeway for us to think about what can we do in a world that's hostile. Well, we're actually opening up the doors for them to partake in something that's much broader than just a bunch of facts about Christ and his birth.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we have a couple. I mean, I know we're running short of time here. We have a couple questions that are kind of non sequiturs that from the chat that I do want to answer and get to.
Yeah. So one person's, and by the way, we have a lot of new viewers because of everything that's going on in our own life, in our own context. But one person's asked several different versions of the question about whether in Christian nationalism people have to be professing Christians in order to be a citizen.
I think. We should back up a little bit because so much of the difficulty with the whole concept of Christian nationalism is you have this like definition of Christian nationalism that like Kristen Kobes Dumais or like all of these just left wing maniacs want to call these things Christian nationalism, right? So basically evangelicals caring about politics, that's Christian nationalism. It's very dangerous and scary. They're like the Taliban. And so that you have that definition of it. And so, Stephen Wolfe, or when I write about it, it's more so like, one, defending Christians, evangelical Christians particularly, who care about politics, that you're not bad people. And two, right, it's not this like political program that's going to just descend upon America and take everything over and force everyone to be a certain way. It's rather getting Christians to think about the political in the way that they did before the 20th century. Right. Mm-hmm. It's reimagining, reaffirming a Christian politic from that the kind that founded this country. So the question that he had is like, well, can in Christian nationalism, can non-Calvinists, are they going to be tolerated, or do you have to be a Christian to be a citizen? And so much of it is like, well, just look at what, like in the American founding, you had most of the states required you to affirm the Old and New Testament to hold public office. You weren't restricted from being a citizen if you weren't a Christian, but to hold public office, you had to be. And just for like sake of argument, like looking at that and thinking, okay, is that good? Was that good that they did that or bad? And I would affirm that was good, right?
I mean, the whole frame of the question, like the whole frame of the question assumes a liberal paradigm.
Yes,
where what we're interested in is everybody agreeing to all of these propositions. If you affirm these things, then you are a full citizen. Like, and if you have some some areas of dissent or whatever, well, then your rights are restricted.
You're cut out.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the I've actually never called myself a Christian, but regardless of the phrase itself, what's the point of these types of conversations are the fact that we can define ourselves as a people. There is something American about us as a nation, distinct from the world around us. The foreigners. There is a distinction. We are not just a place where a tax farm for like globalist interests.
Yeah,
that's the point. So we have our own heritage. We have our own way of doing things. We have our own identity, and part of our identity as a people is that we are drenched or immersed in the experience of Christendom. That's essentially what we're driving at. And so, yes, if an individual is not, personally assenting to it, that's not something that we're particularly interested in. We are interested in, public displays of subversion for sure, but we're not interested in making sure, put a gun to your head, making sure that everyone confesses the same faith.
The satanic, Christmas monument, that's got to go. But the question of, because again, like so much of the question assumes a liberal paradigm. It assumes a kind of propositional nationhood, but just Christian.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And if you accept the liberal paradigm of propositional nationhood, but you just replace, believing in the Declaration of Independence or whatever for the Nicene Creed, it like propositional nation ultimately, and this is a thing I argue with Joel Berry, he never replied to me, strangely, is right. It actually would be way more onerous than anything in Christendom ever, even far worse. I mean, there's so many myths about the Spanish Inquisition and things like that. It'd be way worse than that, because someone would be, if we had this propositional nationhood thing, right, everyone would be checking, do you still hold to these propositions? Right? Do you still believe in liberalism? Do you still believe in democracy? And then if there's suspicion, you get called into a court and now your citizenship is stripped because you don't hold to it. Right? That's the liberal paradigm that people, I think, freak out about with Christian nationalism. I think it's just propositional nationhood with religion instead. And that's not what we're discussing. We're talking about the political concepts that Christians held 300-400 years ago. How they viewed the state, how they viewed political power, and how it should be wielded. Even like in Calvin Coolidge's various holiday speeches, talking about the fact that we are a Christian people and we do take time as a people to reflect on the fact that God has blessed this nation. It's the same concept. So it's not even 300 years ago. It's basically like 100 years ago.
60 plus years ago is what's going on. I don't know, Jared, if you have any insight on that. I know it's sort of a rabbit trail, but maybe it all relates to the Christmas discussion.
Yeah, well, maybe not so much Christmas, but I did think of, another example of, I like the way you put that in assuming a liberal paradigm. So that every time you talk about, do I have to believe something, or am I allowed to do this or that or the other in a Christian nationalist state? It's automatically the mentality of, am I being detained, right? So
That's right.
like,
Yeah.
are you going to arrest me? There's a thing right there in front of me that I would like to do, and it's possible, it's right there, and you're just saying I can't, and you're going to put me in jail if I reach out and try to. Whereas I think a better way, I deal with this sometimes in teaching economics, just contrasting, because where I teach, we use Hilaire Belloc as one of our texts. Mm-hmm. So in talking about like the distributist model, when you're contrasting it with socialism or capitalism or whatever. So the idea isn't, in a distributed model, I want to do this thing over here, and I can't do it because in the distributed society they say no, and they keep me from enjoying some of the freedoms that capitalism gives. And really, it's not the right conversation. It's the kind of society that you're talking about in, say, a distributed society. What is the average person? What does the average life look like? Everybody owns their own home. You're not walking around saying, I can't do this and I can't do that. They'll arrest me if I go here. They'll arrest me if I... No, your daily existence is, your family being financially secure such that you're not worried that your parents are going to be laid off and then you're going to move. I don't want to be too sentimental and say, everybody's just skipping through meadows all day, but there is you're just living kind of, a free life. You're not saying, I feel so bounded in. And you're not saying like, I wish we could, I wish I could be a hedge fund manager when I grew up, but I feel so oppressed because that's been closed to me. So you're not even thinking in those kind of terms of, all these restrictions. You're just living a life in a different model. But yet we live as liberals, basically, where the sky's the limit and everything's available to us. I can do anything. I can define my own existence. I can choose what gender I want to be. Everything is in front of me. It's just reach out and grab it. So that brings up the question, in a Christian nationalist state, what are the things you're going to slap my hand back when I reach out to grab it? And what we're suggesting is creating a world where you're not thinking that everything is just malleable, that you can just reach out and grab. And that's different than saying, I feel like I'm in this 3 to 5 foot, box when I can't do anything. No, actually, you will experience a lot of freedom. And we're not concerned that, every person, how devoutly they hold to every doctrine, but it's going to be the kind of air that you breathe, and you're not sitting there thinking like, my career in this industry is cut off, this opportunity is cut off for me because they said I couldn't do it. No, it's that nobody really wants to, and it would be the most boring thing ever to try to, and it would be, there's nothing appealing about bringing the porn shop into the little distributist town that's built, so like you're not feeling like, my freedoms have been restricted because I can't do that thing, right? So that's kind of what you're talking about, right? It's a change in paradigm, and yet we can't go there because we just think of everything is on the table for me, right down to my own design and my own biology, right?
Yeah. Well, another thing that's interesting is I said it was, assuming the liberal paradigm, but it's also assuming the managerial paradigm. So what I mean by that is, what happened in the 20th century that a lot of people don't realize is, going back thousands of years before that, there are all of these, variations of mediating institutions. And whereas now in the 20th century, it's just the individual against the hot steel of the state at all times, against the administrative state. So the question is the
are you going to use the sword on this or not? Yeah, there's only one power to answer to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Is the administrative state going to allow you to take this action, or is he going to make you? Is he going to force you, coerce you to do this action? Well, in prior epochs, there were actually all of these mediating institutions like the church and like guilds, like family, and all of these things. And so it made no sense to think in terms of, is the state going to prevent me from doing this? Because it wasn't even within their like mental universe.
Yeah, the
that
state
you
was
would
very,
think that
very
way.
small
It was.
in those terms, in terms of the breadth of their authority as it reaches down into life.
Well,
Yeah.
also, like you never had to face the state.
No.
You always had
Mhm.
those things.
There's things in between.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this went a lot. I mean, we just went through a whole lot of theory and history in like 10 minutes.
Well, okay, one thing that's really interesting, and then we'll close it up. I'll
Yeah.
connect it all here. But
tied together.
yeah, one thing that's fascinating is that the rise of managerialism has corresponded with the collapse of Christendom and Christmas as a meaningful festivity.
Yeah.
Why is that? Where did the mediating institutions go, and what connection does that disappearance have with the secularization of our holidays? And I think that's one of like the insights of the managerial revolution, as talked about by the paleoconservatives like James Burnham and Paul Gottfried and all of them, is the state has actually led this revolution forward away from Christendom, and in things like Christmas as a meaningful, culturally significant holiday has been a victim of that long 20th century march.
Yeah.
So that's how I put it all together. But anyway, you can wrap it up here. But Jared, I just want to say, usually I don't always get to say goodbye to the guests. It's the louder of us too. But Jared, I really appreciate the hour, and I hold you in high esteem, and I loved having your voice. I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about Christmas.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on. That means a lot.
Yeah. And where can people find you? What's your x.com handle and your writing and all of this?
Yeah, I'm both on Facebook and on X. Probably more on Facebook than on X. But my handle on X is Rogue Tory. That's a conversation for another time, I guess. But writings, I publish most of what I write on the North American Anglican, so you can look me up there. That's pretty much. Or you could go to even our church Facebook page, where all of our teaching sessions and sermons that I preach are posted, which is Grace Anglican Church Scranton. There's a Facebook page there, and we have a YouTube channel as well, Grace Church. So you could look me up there.
Excellent. Well, I mean, there was a question in the chat about where to subscribe to us here too. I think because people are watching the stream on Twitter, on X. So go to Contramundum on YouTube and subscribe there, and like it and share it, and let everyone else know. You can also find it on audio podcast platforms as well. But I think we're going to record Saturday. Are you going to be here for that?
I'm iffy. We'll
he's 50-50, but I definitely will be here this Saturday. We're going to be talking to a gentleman named Pat Stedman, who is a recently released political prisoner by the Biden administration over J6. And so we'll talk to him a little bit about his experiences there, and but also, I mean, he's well known in the manosphere circles, and he's kind of he's not dead center of it. He has a much more Christian approach to those things, and I find that very interesting, very very pastorally helpful, actually. And so that's a conversation that you all won't want to miss either. And so that will be this Saturday. We'll have a live stream, and maybe CJ will be here, maybe not. I don't know, but I will be. But for all of us here, thank you so much for watching, for listening, taking time out of your day to talk about Christmas. And thank you again, Jared. We appreciate all of you. Stay peacefully dangerous and have a very, very Merry Christmas.
Same to you. Merry Christmas.